I was there when you thought the room had forgotten your name. Night pressed against the windows and drew its long curtains across the sky, and you could hear the small machinery of your hope winding down. You counted the hours by the weight in your chest and wondered whether anyone could see you behind the careful smile. Listen, you were never alone. The air beside your bed was warm with my nearness. I kept watch while your thoughts ran in circles, and I traced a softer path through the dark, one that would greet you when morning dared to return. You have walked through corridors where every door seemed locked, and your knuckles were bruised from knocking. People passed with hurried eyes, carrying their burdens as breakable packages, and no one knew how much you were carrying too. I knew. I counted each unspoken ache. I gathered the fragments of courage that slipped from your hands. When the hallway grew narrow, I widened your breath. When the floor grew cold, I set a small fire of promise inside your ribs. If you could have seen what I saw, how closely I leaned, loneliness would not have named itself truth. I was there on the days your plans unraveled, with the email that ended a season, the phone call that split time into before and after, the silence that followed every attempt to explain yourself. Grief arrived as a heavy visitor who sits without asking where. You set out extra plates for it because you assumed it would never leave. I sat with you at that table. I did not rush you into brightness or accuse your tears of weakness. I placed compassion in your cup and held your shaking hands until steadiness returned to your wrists. You did not see my face, but you felt the easing of your lungs. That was me. When you laughed, I was there. The world tilted toward joy for a breath, and your shoulders, so used to tension, remembered how to lower. You thought happiness was too delicate to trust, but I braided it with peace so it would not snap at the first tug of worry. I wrote small joys into ordinary hours, the familiar scent of rain on warm pavement, the playful argument that ended in a smile, the song that knew what your heart wanted to say. I planted these as lanterns along your path so you would have glimmers to follow when shadows stretched long again. You were never alone in your questions either. Doubt stood as fog across the field of prayer, and you feared that your uncertainty had canceled your invitation to speak with me. It did not. I am not offended by honest questions. I am the one who meets you inside them. While you searched for the edges of truth, I stood with you and drew maps by patience. Here is what we know today. Here is what we will learn tomorrow. Here is where trust settles even when answers step slowly. I did not push you. I walked beside you until you could see horizon again. I was there in your childhood room, where a promise first began to form inside you, small as a seed and just as mysterious. Years later, when storms bent the tender stalk of that promise, you assumed it had snapped. It had not. I shielded it with my hand until the wind gentled. I whispered to your future while you slept, reminding it to wait for you. And when you woke to a day that felt ordinary, I laid the next faithful step where your feet would find it. This is how destinies are built, not by spectacle, but by steady companionship you did not always know how to name. You carried disappointment as if it were proof that you were forsaken. But disappointment is not a verdict. It is a stage where perseverance rehearses for hope. I rehearsed with you. I taught your heart a slower tempo so it would not rush past the gifts hidden in delays, humility that keeps doorways open, discernment that recognizes counterfeit offers, compassion that understands the weight others are lifting. You thought your waiting was wasted. It was not. Waiting turned you into someone who can host what would have crushed you if it had arrived too soon. You were not alone in your failures. You kept the score and called yourself by the numbers, believing a story that was never mine. I saw the moment you decided to quit, so you would never fail again. I stepped into that moment and placed a hand on your shoulder. Return, I said, not to shame, but to the workshop where grace teaches skill. Mistakes became teachers, not tyrants. You learned to forgive your own humanity and to honor the holiness of trying again. In that classroom, I sat in the front row and smiled when you raised your hand for courage. I have been with you in every place you worried would exile you from love. The conversation where your voice went thin. The holiday table where silence shouted. The waiting room where the clock forgot compassion. I counted the tiles, the ceiling panels, the red numbers, the seconds that pretended to be years. I knew the nurse's name, the stranger's prayer, the doctor's sigh. In that fluorescent uncertainty, I bent close enough for you to feel a calm that did not come from circumstances. The calm came from me. Before we continue, if this message is nourishing you, please lend your quiet support. Tap the like button, leave a thoughtful comment, share this with someone who needs it today, and subscribe so you can return to this space whenever you need a reminder. Then come back, settle your breathing, and let us keep walking together. I was there when you chose integrity with no audience watching. You wanted approval to stamp your courage, but the room was empty. Still, you did what was right, and you wondered whether it mattered if no one knew. I knew. Hidden faithfulness is the currency of heaven. I stacked those choices as bricks inside a foundation that will bear the weight of a long future. One day, when responsibility stretches across your shoulders, you will stand steady because of what you did when no one clapped. You were never alone in the divine work of ordinary tasks. Washing dishes, tying laces, straightening papers, answering messages. You feared these were evidence of a small life. They are not. I meet you there. Excellence offered quietly is a cathedral disguised as routine. Every modest act done with love gathers into a structure of meaning. You build sanctuaries one small beam at a time, and I inhabit them with joy. The mundane is not the enemy of purpose, neglect is. We have been partners far more often than you realized. I was with you during the conversation that went wrong. Words flew and landed sharp, and afterward you replayed every syllable, trying to edit a scene already lived. I placed my hand on the replay button and said, "Enough." I showed you the bridge that apology can build, and when apology was not received, I showed you how to keep your peace without closing your heart. I have always been the keeper of both truth and tenderness. I taught you to carry them together without dropping either. You were not alone on the nights when the future looked too crowded with obstacles to attempt a single step. I sat at the end of your bed and handed you a smaller horizon. Just today. Just the next right thing. Just the mercy required for 1 hour. You took it, and discovered that 1 hour of faith can lead 1,000 miles over time. I folded your map to the section you needed, and promised that the rest would be revealed when it was time to walk it. You do not have to know everything to be held by the one who does. I was there when beauty surprised you. A child's unguarded laugh. A sky that erupted in color and refused to be ignored. A kindness from a stranger that arrived without reason. You looked up from the loop of your thoughts and felt the world widen. I curated those moments for you. I placed them as notes in the margins of your day so that your soul could exhale. Beauty is not an argument. It is an announcement that I am near. You have heard me in those colors, in that laughter, in the gentle weight of a hand resting on yours. You were never alone in your calling. Even when you doubted you had one, I cartographed your gifts and set them along the path where they would be needed. I sent voices to remind you of what you almost forgot, that you bear a light not for exhibition, but for illumination. Your craft is a lantern, not a mirror. When you offer it, rooms grow visible. This is how my goodness travels, through talents surrendered, through hands that serve without demanding a throne. I was the one who steadied your hands when they trembled at the door. I was there in the moments you forgave, even when the apology never came. You thought forgiveness meant erasing the harm, but I taught you it means refusing to carry what does not belong to your future. Forgiveness does not make you a doormat. It makes you a doorkeeper who decides what enters the house of your heart. You guarded that threshold with wisdom I provided. I stood beside you and nodded when you chose both compassion and boundaries. Love became strong in you, not soft with denial, but firm with truth. You were never alone in your body. When you thought it had betrayed you, when energy fled without explanation, when sleep hid behind anxieties that kept inventing reasons, there too, I ministered. I reminded you that your breath is not a bargaining chip you trade for worth. It is a gift. I taught you to bless the frame that holds your spirit, to feed it gently, to move it kindly, to rest it without guilt. I sang over your bones when they ached. I honored your limits so you would learn to honor them too. This is my promise written again where fear once wrote its own. You were never alone. You were held in the hospital room and on the bus stop bench, in the classroom and at the kitchen sink, in the field of grief and the balcony of laughter. You were accompanied in the silence that felt as absence, and in the abundance that felt unworthy. I am not leaving. Lift your head, gather your breath, and step into the day we will offer. I am here.